So the first idea about error prevention or error handling is called look before you leap, right? So look before you leap sort of implies that you are checking to make sure that it's safe to proceed before you actually proceed. So how can I prevent errors before they happen? So this isn't really error handling as much as error avoidance, right? So we are looking to avoid having an error in the first place. And an example of that might be this piece of code here, where we are asking for the user to enter a number. So we've got a while loop so that we're not going to let the user go until they enter a number. And what we're doing is we're having them enter the number using input, assigning it to a string, and then we ask, is that number numeric? Now, probably rather than number here, I should be using something that's user friendlier or more explicit for the user, because a number like 3.14 is not what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for an integer, because look at what I'm doing with it here. I'm converting it to an integer. So if they enter a decimal or a float here, it's not going to convert well to an integer. It's also not going to pass the is numeric test. Because remember, is numeric goes character by character and asks, is this character numeric? If it gets through the whole string and all of the characters are numeric, then it returns true. So enter a whole number, an integer, whatever would be user friendliest here. And then I'm asking, before I try to convert it, I'm asking, can it be converted? If this comes back false, then I'm skipping down to the else, which says that's not a valid number, and the whole loop repeats itself. I ask for a different number. So there's no error here, okay? It's very difficult to leave this little loop and create an error by entering something, because if I enter anything other than something that's numeric, it's just going to ask me again. So that's a look before you leap. And if we jump over to our code here, I've got the same thing, but let's just run this as a check. Okay, so we're entering a number. I can enter almost any combination of things, including a decimal. And so that is probably a point where a user could be confused, because I did enter a number. That is a number. What I should be asking for is a whole number or an integer or something like that. So look before you leap is much better if I give the user good instructions to begin with. And that's part of usability. That's part of developing good software. Now, if I wanted to, I could, whatever they enter, I could go through that string one piece at a time. And I could see if it's a decimal. And I could tell them it has to be a whole number. I could give them more specific feedback than that's not a valid number. But for the purpose of this, it's probably okay. It's not great. It's just okay. And one thing you'll realize probably pretty quickly about error handling is that you can use a lot of code trying to make your user's experience like totally optimized. Like, oh, we're getting into the fine details of analyzing their input and giving them useful feedback based on that. I could have 80 lines of code just making sure that my user felt good about the number that they were entering. Is that worth it? Maybe not, depending on where this is going to be used. So that's something you have to analyze as a software developer, is how much is too much in terms of writing code that handles errors and makes sure that your users have the best possible experience. Some schools would say there isn't not such thing as too much, but other schools might say, we have to do better than telling the user there was an error, right? How many times have you used a software where you basically gotten the message, an error occurred? and that's it. I have. And I'm like, okay, I think we could do better than that. But that's just a lazy development practice, right? If you can't tell your user anything more than something went wrong, that's a problem.